lastly, I got to give a shout out to Frodo the cat. As you guys know, I'm not the biggest cat person in the world, and we've gotten some pretty annoying cinematic cats recently. I'm looking at you, Argyle cat, and Garfield. Those two, not great. But this cat, unlike those cats from films that should be forgotten, I like Frodo. He's for the most part, he's pretty cool. He's pretty chill. He's occasionally helpful. He is technically like a service cat. That's they say it's Lupita Nyong'o's service cat in the movie to help her cope with her illness. And he performs a pretty damn fine service in this movie. I like it. Frodo is going to be remembered in the pantheons of horror cats for all time, I think, right there. It's going to be up there with Jonesy, chat. All right, my friends, so let's go ahead and move on to my review for A Quiet Place Day 1, a movie that I've been eagerly anticipating for quite some time. And, of course, for anyone that doesn't know me, I am a huge fan of creature features. There's just something about a single or a handful of characters going up against some sort of entity, creature, or animal that's like terrorizing them, either like picking them off one by one or making their situation even more desperate, just continuously raising the stakes until like the climactic finish. There are just so many great horror films and survival movies that do this so well, from the gothic sci-fi slasher Alien, one of my favorite movies of all time, if not my favorite movie of all time, to John Carpenter's claustrophobic, classic remake of The Thing, to even Steven Spielberg's, Jaws, one of my favorite movies. It's the creature features are just one of my absolute favorite subgenres. Even the bad ones, even some of the dumbest ones or the silly ones. There's just something charming about them, chat. There's just something charming about a deep blue sea.
We're gonna seal off this.
I've always really liked movies like that, and they're just fun to watch together as a group with your friends, or for the watch parties that we've been doing recently. It's been a blast. So it just kind of makes sense that I would just naturally gravitate towards the Quiet Place franchise. One of the most critically and commercially successful creature feature franchises of all time. Certainly of the 21st century. I don't think that's hyperbolic to say. Of course, the first two films were directed by John Krasinski, and people probably best know him for playing Jim from The Office, but he's gone on to do like other things, of course, that Jack Ryan Amazon series, and most recently he's coming off of If, which I wasn't the biggest fan of, but a lot of people did like, so fair enough. But he did a great job with the first two Quiet Place movies. Again, he made some of the best creature features in the last decade, in my opinion. I just love the overall idea for it, where it's in this post-apocalyptic future. Humanity, for the most part, has been ravaged by this alien organism that we don't even really know exactly where it came from initially. But it arrived on the planet, and they are incredibly sensitive to sound. It's like, they can be able to hear a natural conversation, and they will run towards that. They will gallop towards whoever those people are talking and obliterate them, bludgeon them to death, rip them limb from limb. Incredibly aggressive life form, which I think is already great. It's like a great threat for your movie. But one of the things I love most about it was Krasinski's approach to dealing with a creature like that is so sensitive to sound, following this family where one of the children is deaf, and so the whole family knows sign language. So they have a unique advantage over people that don't know sign language, and we just follow them in this intimate, little kind of, I think it's like in somewhere in New York or something. I think it's like upstate New York. That's the location. But it's, they have like the small, farming, community, and it's just them and their family, and things obviously go awry, and situations get worse, and it carries on to part two, and it expands the world and the story and the lore, and we meet new characters. Just all of it. Just all of it I thought was done so incredibly well in the first film, and then later with the second film. I felt invested not only in the world and the creatures, but I liked the characters. And so when bad things actually happen to them, in which there are several times where that's exactly what happens, you feel something, which is great. Which that's not always the case with some creature features. I think that's what makes this movie and other things like The Thing or Alien stand above some of those other ones where, you have some creature feature films where the only thing that, the character's just there to die. They're just meat. It's still entertaining. But these movies, I think, go the extra mile to make you feel invested in these people and their stories. And I really appreciate that. And, because of that, I was very excited, for the third film. And I was very interested, like when the spinoff was announced. So it wasn't exactly A Quiet Place Part 3, but it was this prequel sequel. And it's not just because it's just another entry in this franchise, but it's because it's directed by Michael Sarnowski, who's a name you guys probably some people may not know. But he did direct a film from a couple years ago that I've been adamant about people checking out when they have the opportunity, called Pig. It's this great movie. The marketing kind of made it seem like something it's not. It made it seem like it's like a John Wick like action horror movie. It's really not that. But the whole premise is basically Nicolas Cage. He is this hermit living in the American Northwest, and his only companion, his only person, the only thing there for company is this truffle pig, who finds these rare mushrooms that he sells to a buyer, funny enough, played by Alex Wolff, who's also in this movie. And he just kind of lives this, seemingly, peaceful existence. But his pig ends up being kidnapped, and he teams up with Alex Wolff, try to track down the pig. And really the whole movie, it's not, again, despite what the trailers make it look like, it's not an action film. There's some like action moments and stuff, but it's more of this drama. And the whole premise of the movie is how different characters, how people deal with grief in their own way. Sometimes in a healthy way, or in the case of the pig, unhealthy ways. It's, in any case, it's a great movie. But there were moments within that film that made it look like a horror film. Just the cinematography looked great. It had these kind of creepy atmospheric sequences. So it's like, oh, I want to see more from this guy. And I figured he would make a great horror filmmaker. And lo and behold, his next project is A Quiet Place Day One. But in any case, like I said, I've been excited for this movie. I've really liked all the marketing and the trailers, and now I've finally seen it. So you're asking, how is it? Well, again, let me provide you with the synopsis, and then we'll get into the very quiet and the very loud details of A Quiet Place Day One. When New York City comes under attack from a horrific alien invasion, a woman and several other survivors try to work together to survive and hopefully escape the dangerous creatures laying waste to the human population. So outside the trailers, I purposely did not look into much of the behind the scenes aspects of the film. Like everything to do with like its story, characters, or action sequences. I wanted to be surprised by those moments. And one of the things that I was actually very happy to see was how great the lead characters are in this movie, namely Lupita Nyong'o, of course, Oscar winner. She's made so many great films over these last few years. Wonderful actress, who plays the character of Sam in the film. And Joseph Quinn, who plays the character of Eric, which, in case you guys aren't familiar with Joseph Quinn, he's kind of like, he's been in a number of other shows, like Game of Thrones. He had a small role, but he's probably best known for his role in Stranger Things season 4. He was excellent in that season, and I think people were already like, oh, I want to see what else this guy's gonna do. He's gonna be Johnny Storm in Fantastic Four, so can't wait. Yeah, Eddie, of course, played Eddie in Stranger Things. But what's interesting though is that these two people, who like wouldn't have ordinarily crossed paths, ever with each other within this world, if it just wasn't for this alien invasion. That's what makes their dynamic so interesting. And then the performances is what helps, I think, ground the movie, but also gives it so much heart. Thinking about it, I took some time to think about the movie afterwards. So I saw it with my friend. We were just talking about it, getting some drinks beforehand. And then earlier today, I kind of went a walk before, doing this this review. And just thinking about it, I realized that A Quiet Place, I think its greatest strength, other than the perfect execution of its premise with the creatures, is its lead characters and how warm and kind they can be throughout the story. It's why we're so emotionally devastated by the end of the first film after a certain person sacrifices themselves to keep the family safe. That heart is on full display here with these new characters. And part of their journey with each other is finding the incentive to survive and save one another despite their horrible circumstances. Lupita Nyong'o as Sam is a character in the film that's in a really rough place even before the invasion. Like, her life's already not great, and then the aliens come. It's like, oh, it gets even worse. She's incredibly sick. She has terminal cancer. She's in hospice care and is mentally in a really rough place. She's not that friendly. She's just kind of turned off from everything because of her circumstances. And you understand as to why, because she's so sick. She's basically given up. And then the invasion happens, and then the aliens come and destroy the city. She inevitably finds the will to survive despite her internal and emotional pain. And so, when she eventually comes into contact with Joseph Quinn's Eric, we see her open up more throughout the film, and him as well, who is suffering from PTSD because of everything that has just happened, has transpired. There are several moments between them in the film that are very sweet and heartfelt and just make you care so much about them, their well-being, despite, again, their circumstances. And, it's honestly, it's like stuff on paper, like, well, that's not going to work. Well, that's corny. That's goofy, but it does because they're just so committed and they're so earnest about it. And I really like that. You also some other, it's a very small cast. You have a very small cast. There's a lot of maybe secondary, tertiary characters that just get ripped apart, and bludgeoned to death. We'll cover all that in just a bit. But you do have a couple other people that also appear in the film, namely Alex Wolff, who plays this nurse named Ruben, who obviously has a connection to Lupita Nyong'o's character of Sam. He's good. I like him in the movie. And, of course, this was seen in all the marketing for the film. Jimon Hunsu, he returns the character of Henry, who is a character that we meet in A Quiet Place Part 2. And he talks about the events that led him to, finding the island and establishing the community that we see in A Quiet Place Part 2. We kind of see a little bit of that story here again. Now, if you were going in thinking like this is going to be the Jimon Hunsu show, it's not. He doesn't have a lot of screen time, but when he shows up, he's good. He's quiet too, which I appreciate that. I liked him a lot. But again, it's mostly focused on again, Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn, who are great. Now, the creatures, the stick bugs. I've always called them the stick bugs, or I guess people have also called them the Death Angels. That might be their official name or the name that's been adopted by fans or viewers. But in any case, they are as mean and nasty as usual. Throughout this film, the way they just grab onto people, the way they just bludgeon them, always in the head or parts of their bodies, just obviously just hitting them so hard that it just destroys whatever internally is there, ripping them apart and just everything else in between. It's rough to say the least, but Sarnowski and his collaborators, they come up with some really terrific action sequences and horror sequences with the creatures, some new stuff that we haven't seen before. In a way, I wouldn't be surprised if some people, or if a lot of people, compare this movie more favorably to something like James Cameron's Aliens. which again expanded the world and shows how threatened these creatures are when there are just so many of them to contend with. Like in the original film, especially the first one, we only see these creatures occasionally, and there's only like maybe 3 or 4 in the area, right? And it works for the film. But here, like they're attacking like a major metropolitan area, like a huge city filled with tens of thousands, millions of people, right? And so there are so many of these things just going around. Like there's these, unlike maybe the previous 2 movies where they don't have like a lot of wide shots, Krasinski kept, a lot of, intimate camera work and cinematography, except maybe one showcase some of the environments. But anytime we interact with the creatures, for the most part, the camera is pretty intimate, especially in the first film. Here, you get like a lot of wide shots and you just see these things climbing on top of skyscrapers and buildings and jumping from place to place, crashing through windows, jumping on fucking people, ripping them apart, throwing a person into another person, they explode. There's a lot of blood. There's a lot of meat. There's meat in this movie. Right? And so if you're going in there to see some, some gore and some disturbing sequences, the movie's got you. It has that covered, right? But it also increases the fear, the threat, when it involves the characters that we've really come to know and really like in the film. Now, if I have any really big complaints, and this is a small spoiler, but I have to bring it up. It's not too bad. It's not too big of a spoiler, so don't worry. But when it comes down to it, it's how they choose to have the characters learn about the alien creatures and their sensitivity to sound. I was hoping it would be something like really cool and unique, like because that's part of the like. Okay, so we know like John Krasinski and his whole family. We saw like they've figured these things out. The survivors who've been living this world for the year and a half after these things crash land on the planet. Like they have a good idea of what to do and what not to do, but no one here does, right? And I'm thinking like, okay, what's going to be the inciting moment for Lupita Nyong'o's character, for Joseph Quinn's character? Like, how are they going to, in their own unique way, figure this all out, right? It's like, that's going to be cool. I was looking forward to that. Sadly, the way in which they find out is really dull. Some military helicopters are just like overhead and they just yell. They just yell. It's like, the creatures are sensitive to sound. Just stay quiet and we'll rescue. That's it. That's what it is. And I was like, how they all just need to stay silent. And I was like, well, that's kind of lame. It just felt like a hand waving thing. Like, listen, we got to get this out of the way. The characters need to learn about this so that we can move the plot forward. And that was the one moment where I was just like, I wish they did something a little more interesting personally. I wanted them to figure it out in their own way. But again, that's just not what happens. Oh, and there's like a couple of jump scares that were not necessary. I mean, the Quiet Place films, they don't really do jump scares too often. Like the first movie maybe has like 2 or 3. And the same thing with this one. This one, again, kind of has like a couple of jump scares, which didn't feel necessary. There is a teleporting stick bug. It's like, how the fuck did that stick bug get there, right? But, so there's that. But other than that kind of one complaint, and maybe you guys might not have that issue. Maybe you're like, I don't give a shit. And like this point, like I'm glad they got through that quickly. That's my friend was saying. Who I saw the film with, he was just like, I don't really care how they figure it out. It's like, long as they know, and then the movie can continue on. But I kind of wanted to see what they were going to do. But in any case, whatever. That might not bother you. But other than that, maybe other than the jump scares, I think the film succeeds in everything it's trying to do for the most part. The characters I think are great across the board. Especially our 2 leads of Nyong'o and Quinn. I want to see him in more stuff. And I'm even more excited for him as Johnny Storm. Like, they're just, I know I'm kind of doing a bit of a wrap-up, but it just made me realize, like, Johnny Storm, again, is a very funny character, a part of the Fantastic Four. But so much what works about the Fantastic Four is this family, is that family dynamic. And some of the things that he goes out of his way to do for Lupita Nyong'o's character, it's like, if he does something similar in, like, Fantastic Four, fucking can't wait. Because that's what we need from Johnny Storm, and I'm very excited for that. So, again, really liked what both of them did. The practical and I think the CGI effects are good. I think this film has the biggest budget in the franchise, and I think they use it very well. There's some really tense moments throughout the movie, some great chase sequences that are very thrilling. And again, as I said before, it has that heart that makes you care about these lead characters. Maybe at first you might not completely feel invested in Lupita Nyong'o because she's just so closed off, but despite her circumstances. But when she interacts with other people, especially with Quinn, then it's just like you totally understand like what she's going through and everything. It makes the things that she does later on in the movie even more impactful and beautiful in a way. Lastly, I got to give a shout out to Frodo the cat. As you guys know, I'm not the biggest cat person in the world, and we've gotten some pretty annoying cinematic cats recently. I'm looking at you, Argyle cat, and Garfield. Those two, not great. But this cat, unlike those cats from films that should be forgotten, I like Frodo. He's for the most part, he's pretty cool. He's pretty chill. He's occasionally helpful. He is technically like a service cat. That's they say it's Lupita Nyong'o's service cat in the movie to help her cope with her illness. And he performs a pretty damn fine service in this movie. I like it. Frodo is going to be remembered in the pantheons of horror cats for all time, I think, right there. It's going to be up there with Jonesy, chat. I liked it. There's some weird maybe continuity things to the cat occasionally that pops up that I would like to discuss more in a maybe in a spoiler review someday. Because the cat's like kind of in and out of water, but it's such a film mistake where you have someone who falls into water, but then they come out and then like a scene later, they're completely dry. Some stuff like that happens to the cat. But in any case, I liked Frodo quite a bit. Thought they were very nice. And that's the cat you listen. Any other cat would get you in trouble in a horror scenario, post-apocalyptic scenario, just being loud and just all like that. Frodo doesn't do that, so I appreciated that quite a bit. But yeah, this is a very emotional and I think well-made creature feature that has the heart of the previous two Quiet Place films, and it's constantly on display. And what's also great about this movie too is, if you have not watched the previous two films, that's okay. You can watch without having seen that, since it's just a side story. Some characters from maybe those movies are here, but again, it's not like you need to know exactly who they are. It's just all that matters is who they are in the moment within the film itself. And again, that makes the film very accessible to new viewers. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Aside from a couple of complaints, obviously people are going to be saying that you're not using CGI for the cat, which I appreciate. It's not Argyle cat, but and people are naturally going to ask, like, is this better than A Quiet Place Part 1, Part 2? And I don't know yet. For right now, I think it's great. It's a great film. I don't know. There's something about like the first and the second movie that are just so special. But this one I think is great. I think if you go in that thinking you're going to see a really good creature feature of some really emotional moments and some great lead characters, then you're going to be set. But, naturally you're just going to start comparing it to the first two movies, which I understand. But for right now, I think it's great. And it is a wonderful franchise at this point. Seriously. I mean, there's so few horror franchises out there where as you keep making sequels, where the franchise itself stays consistently good. Those franchises are few and far between, but so far for A Quiet Place, it has been consistent, which is great. And so I'm looking forward to A Quiet Place Part 3. I think they will make that movie eventually. I mean, this film looks like it's going to be a pretty big commercial success, along with being a critical success. So I'm really excited. I hope you guys are excited too. But let me know, for those of you who have seen the film, did you enjoy it as much as I did? Maybe you had a few issues like I did, but overall you liked it. Were you more mixed on the movie? Or did you just not like it? Did you not like this one compared to the first two? Or you're just not a fan of the Quiet Place franchise, not a fan of creature features? Let me know.
5 minutes later.
Leave me alone. Let me out of the bag. Oh, Lord. Oh, my God. Garfielding. Man. The cat is great. I like the cat quite a bit. Frodo was good. As I mentioned last night, I really kind of loved the movie, to be honest. Not only did I find it suspenseful like the other two, but it takes a concept to a new, smart level and is very emotional at the same time. Agreed. Will help if it's two leads. Agreed. And that darn cat. In my opinion, my favorite film in the franchise, maybe my favorite film in the year so far. It's up there for me. No, this is definitely in my top 10 right now. Like, no question. Maybe I have a couple films above it, but overall, this is high on my list. And I actually will be next week, Chad. I'm going to be doing my best of and worst of list for the year so far. So tune in for that. In A Quiet Place, I mean, you know, it's going to be on that list. Day one, that is. My only complaints are a couple unnecessary jump scares. Yeah, I agree. I would have liked a little more development for Eric Quinn's character, but those are minor nitpicks for me. Yeah. As someone who hasn't seen the second, how does it compare with the first? It's great. The thing is, like, for me, it's Quiet Place 1 and A Quiet Place 2, it's hard for me to figure out, like, which one do I like more. They're just kind of head and shoulders right next to each other. They're just great, you know. I think, like, maybe A Quiet Place. The one thing I will say that I think A Quiet Place Part 2 has over Part 1 is that I think Part 2's ending is stronger than Part 1. The final kind of like standoff moment, if you will, I think that's done better in Part 2. But at the same time, like, Part 1 still has that emotional moment with John Krasinski's character. It's just like, oh my God. I remember when I first saw that film in the theater, people were crying. You know, I was like, damn, they just nailed it. And there's moments in this movie where I can see people, they'd get pretty emotional and they get a little water-eyed too. But if you like the first one, I think there's a really, really good chance that you're gonna really like this one too. Also, it's nice that we're in a different environment, you know, because the first two films, for the most part, kind of take place in the country. You know, we're in upstate New York, I believe, you know, and in these small towns and villages. And I guess later on we go to that kind of like island community in Part 2. For the most part, you know, again, we're in very wooded environments of small towns. Here, it's a city, right? And so they play around with that environment in a great way that makes it scary. Because the thing about cities, you know, they're very loud. And so for the creatures, it's a smorgasbord of sound and death and meat tearing. So that's what makes it stand out, I think, from the first film. And I think that's what's going to eventually invite the aliens comparisons, because there's just so many of the creatures, you know, running amok. Let's see here. Gerald, I pretty much agree with you on everything. I didn't expect to feel for the main character as much as I did, especially Sam. Yeah, Plato made the movie for me. She's great. Yeah, what they end up, I don't want to say too much, but, you know, what they ended up doing with her, especially towards the end, I was like, nailed it. They did a great job. Yeah, her and Joseph Quinn. Felt like it really works when different stories can be told in The Quiet Place. Yeah, that's kind of, yeah, look at it that way. I think another comparison you can kind of make, even though they've kind of messed it up, the Cloverfield films. Like, you had the first one, which was giant monster found footage, but then you had the next one, 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is taking place in the same world of this alien invasion or whatever, except it's in this bunker and these people are just trying to survive. It's kind of like that. You know, yeah, I mean, they could approach this series in that way. I mean, they kind of already did. Or, you know, another comparison maybe would be like World War Z. Not the movie World War Z, because it's barely anything like the book, but the book World War Z by Max Brooks. And funny enough, is the son of Mel Brooks. Where it's just all these different stories of how these people across the world, from military figures to, like, you know, Joe Schmoes to, like, anyone else, nuns or samurai or, you know, divers, how they dealt with the zombie apocalypse. And if they want to approach this franchise in that way to make it feel fresh, you get some, you know, new stars in there, so, you know, you're not always seeing the same characters. Because eventually it's like, okay, how often are these characters going to put themselves in danger, right? And so seeing new people, that makes it, you know, more interesting. And you get a little more invested in their stories and doesn't feel the same, you know? So that's what works about this movie. Like Pig, this really surprised me in how emotional the film is. I was worried about how the embargo... That's the thing. The embargo. I can't believe they embargoed this. This is weird. Unless they just had misgivings. I listened until yesterday morning, so going to this not knowing any sense of critical perception worried me. Sure. Yeah, someone from upstate New York feels like home. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, has that kind of cozy feel, right? Bad Boy, I love part one, but the ending was like, we know we can hurt them. Cogs gun. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The whole, it's like such a, like, an action movie thing, which, again, I'm not, like, for an action film, I think that would make sense. But for like that movie, it felt a little weird. It didn't ruin The Quiet Place for me. Believe me, I love that movie. We're going to watch it again tonight. But how Quiet Place Part 2 handled its ending, I thought was much better. And I think the ending for this movie is also great. And I don't want to say too much about that, obviously. I don't want to ruin it for anyone. Gentlemen, my theater only had a few people in it, so it was actually quiet. Oh, very good. I was able to really immerse myself in this movie. Those loud parts were loud. Yeah, no, that's the other thing. I should have mentioned this. Sorry. The sound design in this movie, impeccable. The sound design is great. It's like how they play with the lack of sound makes it so intense, so tense. But then when something is loud, it's impactful. It's like, no, because you know these things are going to come at them now. You know, they're going to come after them. So, yeah, on a technical level, outside of, like, you know, the creatures and the CGI effects and the practical effects, how all that is done, the meat, great. But, yeah, the sound design in this movie, wonderful. Wonderful. As it is in the previous two films. They're always good. So that's consistent. The sound design is amazingly done. Yeah, 100%. 100%. So, yeah. Yeah, it looks like a lot of us are pretty much on the same page. I am curious for the rest of you guys when you have the opportunity to check it out, what you think. You know, for those of you who've never seen A Quiet Place films, we're going to at least watch the first one tonight, but we might also watch part 2 as well, especially if you guys really like that, because I love those movies. So it's been a hot minute since I've seen the first one, so that'll be really, really fun. But yeah, Chad, that's my review for A Quiet Place, day 1, not day 3, as I was saying earlier to my friend. And yeah, I highly recommend it. A really great horror film. Yeah, so far, in terms of, I mean, we've gotten some bad horror movies, no doubt about it. You know, crap like Night Swim and Imaginary, and what was that other one I saw? There was another horror movie that I saw. I can't think of it. That was pretty goddamn bad. But we've gotten some really good horror movies this year. You know, Late Night at the Devil, Out of Darkness, I thought was really good. First Omen blew me away. I couldn't believe how great that movie was. Very shocked by that one. The prequel sequel. Hope more people check that out. And there were a couple other ones as well. But, and Sting. Sting was fun. Yeah, I know Maxine's next week. Maxine, that's going to be I'm so excited for Maxine. I can't wait. I was thinking of maybe doing some watch parties for X and Pearl. I think that would be pretty good, you know, to lead into Maxine for you guys if you guys haven't seen them. But yeah. Yeah, we have some other big horror movies that are coming out. Nosferatu's coming out later this year, Chad. Got Smile 2 on the way and some other stuff. Heretic is coming out. We saw a trailer for that the other day. So, yeah, I've got some good horror movies. But Quiet Place Day 1 is one of those good horror movies, in my opinion, for 2024. Is Michael Sarnoski doing this for part? Really? Wow, I'm surprised John Krasinski's not going to do part 3. I figured he would. I mean, that's fine. I think Sarnoski is going to do a great job. I'm not upset by that news. I'm surprised. I figured like Krasinski would want to, you know, wrap that story up himself or do the third one. I don't know if it's going to wrap up the story. I'm not even sure. But really, okay. That's fine. I want to see more from Sarnoski. And if you guys, again, have not checked out Pig, do yourself a favor and watch that. I think you'll like it a lot. But just don't go and think it's an action movie, because it's not that. My neighbors are yelling at each other. We just need the clip of Penn Jillette saying, "You need to shut the fuck up."